were we the ones who started to rethink learning with future skills. It's an honor to speak here at the Eden Conference in 2021, at the online conference, and congratulations to my Eden friends who organized this conference. You do a wonderful job of bringing us here together. I would like to start my talk actually with a thought experiment. The Eden community has made it always a natural habit to think about the future. That's why a title like Future Skills for Future Higher Education is nothing new to you, colleagues. We are always, imagining what will come and formulating strategies and concepts to be prepared or to build a momentum also for change. And we usually do that by thinking about and analyzing, and many papers are about exactly this, analyzing which are the most influential factors of today and how can we project them into the future. And today I would like to challenge this method. As a thought experiment, I would like to invite you not to ask what is going to happen in the future. Let us rather pretend we are already in the future. We are already there and way beyond it. And now we are all looking back. The future has already happened, and the question then is who we were. So we take a point of time in the future, can you imagine? And we look back into the past, which is today. Why is that useful? Of course, because of the power of contextualization. We all can easily make sense of our own past. Think about your own history. Your history. And what we are doing is we are framing a context around our experience. In the future, this is difficult. And secondly, also, when we look back at our own lives and at the development of our institutions and societies and countries and regions and families, we can immediately make sense. We can immediately understand that, of course, all our actions had consequences, but we can also understand that our past and our today is not the result of a big plan, of careful strategy. It is rather the result of reactions to unexpected events, which often we had not even imagined to be possible. And COVID is just one example of such events. So we begin to understand that just like the past, also the future is characterized by the unexpected, the emerging, the unforeseeable. Any education which claims to be future-ready education has to aim to prepare learners to deal with this unexpected. What education, and higher education specifically, can contribute to gain in future readiness is to equip learners with a compass, with clear values, to take their decisions in the future, and a community to reflect, share, and learn. And that is why today I would like to invite you to start to think about the future with the same perspective you are looking at the past, with the same understanding, who we were. To think about who we were allows also to ask the question, was that the future we wanted? I would like to structure my reflections into three parts, talking about a distant emerging future, then a snapshot of a current future, and then the immediate next. So you see, I'm a bit obsessed with futures and different futures in different shapes and forms. Part one, the distant emerging futures, looking at future higher education with a very long-term and very removed view. And we will see that education, in essence, always has been a struggle for the next best future. Yeah. Part two is about capturing a bit more from our time today, what we can perceive already in the future to be important and relevant, but for which we as institutions of higher education maybe are not ready yet exactly to cope with it, to shape it. And then part three is about the immediate next future, which we are already having on our fingertips. So let's start with part one. Let's have a look at long-term perspectives. Education, is always a history of ideas. And if you would have asked Aristoteles here on the left lower corner, 2,300 years ago, he would say education has to serve happiness and leisure, one thing which I like very much. Then Descartes and Kant and others, Horkheimer, Adorno, came in this age of enlightenment with this idea of emancipation. So education had to serve the freeing of the individual from societal structures. And then again, a few centuries later, Humboldt inventing the idea of the modern university, wanting very much to serve the state practice, so that the state is actually working. Qualification became an issue. Today we can see and we can, I think, understand that the future general principle of today is actually transformation, which is a totally different idea than a functioning state in an ordered system. Transformation is the idea of a mutually dependency between systems in societies. If we look at higher education history, we can say that while it is changing its mission, it is always also changing its architecture. If we look into the architecture of higher education systems, we can literally see how this is taking shape and how the change is taking shape. From a very exclusive but content-rich liberal arts idea of the early Bologna University campus in 1088, for chosen few, the elite, very, very few people could only participate, to today, the massified and standardized idea of higher education in a time in which academic education becomes a standard experience to the majority of people. We have heard about that in the talk this morning. And then again, to a future which we view here, the campus of the MIT, the Stata Center, the future which we view already as a postmodern architecture style of rip and mix, which alludes to an individualistic style, which again carries this idea of diversity, catering for the individualistic, personalized education path, but this time with an inclusive idea. So the future of higher education can be, well, imagined in an almost utopian way as inclusive and diverse, catering for individualistic needs for all. This, we know, will not be possible without digital technology, platform ideas, platform concepts, micro-credentials, and the entire set of development which we still have to develop and introduce. Our discussion also is often centered around this idea of the digital and its influence on higher education. Often, very, very often it is. I think that when it comes to the future of higher education, it is important to understand two things. First, the digital is the engine, the catalyst of the process, not the final result. And secondly, we are definitely not through with it. We are definitely not through with the digital transformation, but rather in the beginning, on the verge of a next society. This was impressively analyzed by Dirk Becker, who shows that the transition process from one leading media to another always was causing huge societal disruption. He calls this media epochs, and the transition of one epoch to the next epoch is always involving a major disruption. It's characterized through a huge overflow of information and communication possibilities, and societies usually need a long time to get to terms with it. Where society took about 60 to 80 years for the last machine industrial age to unfold in all its recuperations on society, social structures, economic structures, labor structures, and so on. We are now still in a very early stage of a next society under digital change to take shape. Today, we can virtually feel that we live in a world with limitless possibilities, but without a good idea how to bring it into a sustainable zone. These are the challenges. I don't need to name them. In a society 5.0, higher education needs to focus on transformative skills, or like Otto Scharmer likes to call it, vertical literacies, to enable learners to deal with the unforeseen. Were we the ones who used education technology to support transformative literacies? I come to the second part of my presentation. In the second part of my presentation, I would like to talk about the futures which are a bit closer to us. The current future is often described through trends. These are trends, what I want to talk about. So I want to use causal reasoning, foresight, what we expect to happen. What will that be? Let's have a look. In our research, we were designing 4 prototypical personas, which I would like to tell their stories now. First of all, there is Florence. Florence is just 20 years old and wants to start her studies. Since she has just recently joined the Global Changemakers, a group of European environmentalists, she knows she wants to study to shape the future of society. And she wants to enter through the lion's den. She wants to go to Google to break the system from inside, she thinks. From conversations, she knows at Google, they are not interested in university degrees, but in what we call future skills. This is about rather developing a mission than making a master. Future skills are, for example, taking responsibility, taking decisions. We will learn about that later a little bit more. Being able to work well in international teams, and so on and so on. So Florence asks herself, where can I study that? Do you have an advice for Florence? Then we have Lena. Lena wants everything in life. She has already started her studies and is now finding out more and more that there are also interesting courses at other universities. Many of them are also online. She therefore decides she wants to study in a completely networked way and enrolls at many universities at the same time. We call this the multi-institutional study model. She, Lena, wants to become a marine biologist. It should be networked, preferably at universities around the Baltic Sea, because she likes the sea, or the Mediterranean, and it should be European. But is that possible? And then here, meet Bashir. Bashir is frustrated. He has dropped out of his studies. somehow he doesn't fit into the system, it seems. Sure, at first he was very interested in business psychology, the subject he had chosen. But then he was also interested in literary studies and theater pedagogy. After all, he thought that's exactly what you can use later as a human resource manager. He would love to build his own curriculum. We call this the personalized microcurriculum concept. Where can you do that? And now, lastly, Niels. Niels has been an experienced social worker for 15 years and works with young people. He now wants to study social management, but with only as much time as he has available, besides family, jobs, and sports club, and he wonders if there isn't a way that all of his experience can then be recognized in the new studies as well, because he has already a lot of experience, a lot of knowledge with deviant behavior in adolescence or social psychology. So he would like to find a possibility to bring this all in and have it recognized. Couldn't he just study the way it suits him? We call this lifelong academic education. Yeah, what is this meaning for the ingredients of the master narrative for future higher education? Lifestyle integration is important. Lifelong learning, we have talked about that a long time already, is important. Never realized it really in higher education so far. It should be borderless, it should be experiential, it should be digital, but in a meaningful way. There needs to be a compatibility between the courses, between the different institutions, and not just long modules, also short courses. So we make from that in our research the 4 core elements composing the future of higher education. We believe that future higher education institutions probably will take from them certain profile aspects and compose their new profile. And now I would like to make an experiment with you. Go to Mentimeter, take your phone or your laptop, go to menti.com and enter this code there, 1539 1139. You can also scan the QR code. And the question is, in your view, which of the 4 futures will impact higher education within the next 5 years strongest? Is it lifelong learning? Is it future skills? The turn to future skills? Is it the institutional networked university? Or is it the personalized curriculum development? So what do you believe is the future of higher education going to be influenced by strongest? Go to Mentimeter, go to menti.com, go to menti.com or scan the QR code. Or use the link in order to tell us your vote. I'm trying to find the
I did it for you, Ulf, don't worry. So I post the link so you can go directly online. Perfect, thank you.
Okay, it's not working yet. So maybe I'm, okay. So we have 21 people which have already finished, but it's not showing it on my slide. It will work in a moment, I'm sure. Okay, just presenting it like this. Okay, now we have 32 people. Okay, so I'm sharing this like this now. I hope you can see it. So there are 38 people having voted, and the first rank goes to personalized by curriculum. Then we have the lifelong learning, not unexpected on place 2, and the Future Skills University, and then the multi-institutional network university. By the way, in our expert interviews, we were also finding that the experts were saying there are a lot of concepts around, like micro-credentials and building standard European tools, which make a compatibility of education, higher education pathways. But this will be the biggest challenge to overcome. So thank you very, very much for your opinion here, and I go back to my presentation. That's this one. Okay, perfect. Thank you very much. Yeah, so the question here is, were we the ones who led the coalition to shape future higher education in that way? And I come to my last part, the third part of my presentation, about the immediate next future. We did a large-scale research project to find out what can be said about the immediate next expectations in the future of higher education. And we were finding out that future skills are very, very demanded. So the people we were asking, quantitative and qualitatively, were often very, very passionate about that higher education needs to change its mission. Of course, that knowledge is not becoming unimportant, but that the way, the mode we deal with knowledge needs to change, and that it rather needs to be an education weaving into knowledge the attitudes, the motivation, the values, the discussions, labilizing young people to really rethink where they are and what they are up to. We were first then going to analyze what's actually available, the future skills approaches which were available. And we found that we were analyzing 47 of them, I think, that they were often focused on digital literacies or on special literacies like health literacies, for example. That there was often also a strong alignment with employability, which we found quite narrow because the future society is not always only shaped on basis of employability reasoning, that there was no empirical validation often, and that often these approaches were not rooted in education theory, or at least education reasoning or competence concepts, so that they were merely lists of aspects where you didn't understand how they were composed. The 17 different profiles for future skills, which we then obtained and refined and reformulated, and then put into an expert Delphi with 2 rounds to, let's say, reformulating, refining them again, and also a little bit to validate them, were then published. There are literacies and skills which are, of course, known to everybody, learning literacy and self-competence, but there are also others having to do with self-determination, a special kind and description of decision competencies, ambiguity competence, dealing with different expectations in different roles. Of course, digital literacy is also on board, reflective competencies, ethical competencies, and so on. We were developing what we call the Future Skills Explorer. So here you can go to the website nextskills.org. You find this Explorer and you can click on a competence, on a skill, and then you get a description, a definition, and a fact sheet which you can download so that you have everything at hand. We're also looking at the inner structure of these future skills, these 17. We're finding that some of them are more individual related, some of them are more object related to the tasks, and some of them are more related to organizational competencies, social competencies. And we were then also developing this idea that successful action in unknown emerging contexts probably demands, so to speak, an interdependent understanding of the skill development. I'm coming to the end, we are actually currently starting what we call the Global Future Skills Project. So we want to find good examples of good practice of these kind of university higher education programs on all 5 continents, and would be happy if you can spread the call, which you find here as well. Everything is to be downloaded also on nextskills.org, all publicly available, published as open access. And for the end, I'm coming back to the beginning, to the question who we were. Were we the ones who started to rethink learning with future skills? I believe, colleagues in our Eden community, we know what we have to do. The implementation is the challenge, not the development. And it is on us. It is clear that it can only be done through a systems approach, not an individual teacher. We know that the fundamental pedagogy which we need is available. We are piloting it often. And we need to start. 2 issues are necessary: strengthening the belief in the competitiveness and viability of a future skills university. That's not a deviant, idiotic idea. That's really something which is demanded and expected of higher education for the future. And secondly, we need to spread this practice. I firmly believe that in a way, for higher education, the future skills turn, as I have described it in the study and in the presentation, is representing our landing on the moon of European higher education for the future. So were we the ones who started this? Or were we the ones who knew but did not understand, full of information but lacking insight, brimming with knowledge but lacking experience? So just keeping forging ahead, unstopped by ourselves. As Roger Willemsen, a German intellectual, phrased this question in his famous speech of the future a couple of years ago. Who we were, think about who we wanted to be. Let's start telling the story from today on. Thank you very much for your attention.